Have you ever felt paralyzed by the fear of failure? Have you ever stopped yourself from speaking your mind for fear of judgment? Or felt that, deep down, you were a fraud? If the answer is yes, you are not alone. Many of us spend our entire lives trying to appear perfect in order to succeed. But the truth is that the pursuit of perfection is what destroys your self-confidence. The good news is that Harvard social psychologist Amy Cuddy has the key to turning off that fear. In this video, we're going to delve into the science of presence. You will discover how your body is actively sabotaging or boosting your mind, and how you can use a technique of just 2 minutes to change your brain chemistry, reduce stress, and increase confidence, transforming your mindset. Absolutely unshakable. That is the difference between to fake be confident and to become truly confident. If you're ready to dismantle imposter syndrome and build a foundation of success that withstands any criticism or adversity, this video is your roadmap. Stay with us, because the next step is the secret to rewriting your inner story. And so you don't miss our practical guide on the famous power pose. Subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell right now. Let's begin this transformation. The power of presence, not perfection. The essence of an unwavering mindset, as articulated by Amy Cuddy's research and philosophy, lies in the deep understanding and practice of what she calls presence. This concept is not merely a passing state of mind or a public speaking technique. It is a holistic and multifaceted condition encompassing the alignment of mind, body, and emotion, allowing the individual to manifest and express their truest thoughts, feelings, values, and potential. Presence is fundamentally the opposite of perfection. While the pursuit of perfection is a mental trap that leads to critical self-evaluation, anxiety, and, paradoxically, inhibited performance, presence invites authenticity and self-acceptance in the moment. To create a success mindset that no one can bring down, it's crucial to abandon the tyranny of perfectionism. The perfectionist is always focused on the future, the flawless result, or the past, the mistakes to avoid, which prevents complete immersion in the present. Presence, on the other hand, demands being completely engaged in the here and now, allowing the person to access their inner resources, their intelligence, and their creativity without the noise of fear of judgment or failure. When an individual is truly present, they are not consumed by the worry of how they are being perceived. They are focused on communicating their message or executing their task. This shift in focus, from being evaluated to being engaged, is what gives resilience and unwaveringness to the mindset. The energy that would be spent on constantly monitoring performance and trying to mask insecurity is freed up for action and genuine expression. Presence has roots in social psychology and neuroscience. Cuddy and his colleagues demonstrated that when people feel present and confident, they exhibit a specific hormonal profile, higher levels of testosterone, associated with assertiveness and power, and lower levels of cortisol, the primary stress hormone. This profile is not only a result of presence but also a facilitator. By using techniques such as power poses, which are physical expressions of presence, the individual can consciously induce these biochemical changes. Adopting an open and expansive posture, even for a brief period, signals to the brain that the body is in a position of safety and mastery, reducing the stress response and increasing the feeling of control and calm. It's a two-way communication. The mind influences the body, but the body has an equally profound power to shape the mind. The distinction between presence and perfection is vital. Presence implies vulnerability. It accepts that authentic expression may include hesitations, imperfections in delivery or execution. However, this vulnerability is, paradoxically, the source of strength. When an individual tries to be perfect, they become rigid. Their performance seems artificial, and the fear of making a mistake is overwhelming. When they allow themselves to be present, energy flows more freely. Communication is clearer and more persuasive, and the connection with others is deeper. Failures or slips become information and opportunities for adjustment, not catastrophes. The focus shifts from idealized performance to delivery, real value, and meaning. That's the mindset no one can break down, one that isn't based on a flawless facade, but rather on a solid foundation of self-knowledge and acceptance of the human condition. The key is to understand that presence is not an innate characteristic of a fortunate few, but a trainable skill accessible to everyone. It manifests itself through self-awareness and awareness of the environment, the ability to regulate one's own emotions and maintain focus, even under pressure. It is a continuous practice of self-validation, where external approval is less important than the individual's own self-worth. Internal integrity: when you ground yourself in your presence, you bring your best resources to the table, which naturally leads to success. And most importantly, This success is robust because it doesn't depend on maintaining an illusion of perfection, but rather on the constant renewal of a commitment to your authentic and engaged self. Thus, the path to an unwavering mindset necessarily involves replacing the anxious and destructive pursuit of perfection with the cultivation of the calm, strength, and expressiveness that only presence can offer. Presence acts as a shield against external judgment because it internalizes the locus of evaluation. The present person does not seek validation in the audience's reaction or in the feedback of others. Their reference point is fidelity to their own truth and how fully they have expressed themselves. If the goal is to express oneself authentically, and the person manages to do so, the goal has been achieved, regardless of the immediate external outcome. This dismantles the power that the opinions of others have over self-esteem and motivation. Presence allows the individual to navigate life's uncertainties more fluidly, as they are reacting to the moment instead of to a pre-written and rigid script. It is a state of being adaptable, strong, and genuinely compelling, which is inherently more powerful than any attempt to be perfect. The rejection of perfection in favor of presence is, ultimately, an act of empowerment. It frees the individual from the paralysis caused by the fear of failure and constant self-criticism. An unwavering mindset is built on the foundation of, I am enough now, not, I will be enough when I am perfect. This recognition allows for immediate action, continuous learning, and the ability to recover quickly from setbacks. Performance improves not by striving to be flawless, but by being relaxed, engaged, and in tune with the moment. Presence is, therefore, the most powerful tool for building confidence that emanates from within, making a person impervious to destructive criticism and the setbacks of success. Power postures, the exploration of power dynamics, or power posing. This constitutes one of the most widespread and sometimes controversial pillars of Amy Cuddy and her collaborators' research, but it is undeniably fundamental to building an unwavering success mindset. The central concept lies in the idea of feedback between body and mind. How we position ourselves physically is not just a reflection of our psychological state, but a causal agent that can induce significant biochemical and behavioral changes, shaping our self-perception of power and our ability to cope with stress. The strategic use of these postures, expanding the body to assume open and dominant spaces, is a practical tool for accessing the state of presence, and should not be confused with the pursuit of perfection in appearance or performance. The fundamental distinction is, again, between presence and perfection. Perfection is an external outcome goal, focused on avoiding failure and ensuring approval. Power poses, however, are an internal intervention designed to optimize the physiological and psychological state of the individual before to enter a situation of evaluation or challenge. The goal is not to appear perfectly confident, but rather to feel more powerful and less stressed, so that subsequent performance is more authentic and less inhibited by anxiety. The power pose is a preparation, a mental and physical framework that allows the individual to be who they truly are, without the armor of perfectionism. The detailed history behind the technique is based on evolutionary and ethological principles. In almost all animal species, from primates to humans, displays of power and dominance are communicated through expansive postures. A dominant animal takes up more space, extends its limbs, and becomes vertically larger. A submissive animal shrinks, hunches its body, and minimizes the space it occupies as a self-protective mechanism. These body signals are universal and deeply encoded. Researchers have extrapolated this knowledge to neuroscience and human psychology, investigating whether the intentional adoption of these expansive, high-power postures could trigger the same hormonal states associated with power and low stress in social contexts. Cuddy's key intervention is the practice of high-power poses for a period of just 2 minutes, privately and away from public view, before moments of pressure. These poses include those that maximize the area the body occupies, such as standing with hands on hips, the Wonder Woman pose, raising arms in a V for victory, or sitting with feet on the table and hands behind the head. Low-power poses, by contrast, involve crossing arms and legs, hunching over, and touching one's neck, which demonstrates restraint and vulnerability. Research has shown that adopting these poses can lead to significant hormonal changes. The practice of high-power poses is associated with an increase in hormone levels. Testosterone, the hormone of dominance, assertiveness, and risk tolerance, and a decrease in levels of cortisol, the stress hormone. It is crucial to understand the magnitude and significance of these changes. A reduction in cortisol indicates that the nervous system is moving from a state of threat and anxiety to a state of calm and control. An increase in testosterone suggests that the individual is feeling more confident, prone to action, and less hesitant. The core idea is that by modifying physical expression, the individual alters their internal psychobiological state, which, in turn, influences how they behave and communicate. The power pose acts as an internal push that temporarily reconfigures the brain's chemical balance, empowering the person to face the challenge with more internal resources. This process is an example of the fake it till you make it a principle. Fake it till you become it. It's not about deceiving others with false confidence, but about using physiology to induce the psychological shift. By assuming the posture of a high-powered individual, the mind, in a process of unconscious self-suggestion, begins to align with this physical reality. The result is not perfection of execution, but presence and authenticity in expression. The individual becomes less reactive to pressure and more able to access their thoughts and abilities in critical moments. Scientific criticism regarding the complete replication of initial hormonal results does not diminish the importance and psychological impact of the technique. Even if the exact hormonal effect is debated, the behavioral and subjective effect of feeling more powerful and less anxious through body posture is widely recognized. The act of expanding is, in itself, a powerful act of self-suggestion and reinforcement. It interrupts the vicious cycle of anxiety, which leads to hunched postures, and hunched postures, which reinforce anxiety. By breaking this cycle, power poses offer an immediate and low-cost intervention for stress management and increased self-confidence before any socially risky situation. In short, the power pose technique is a physiological shortcut to presence. It allows a person to intentionally manipulate their own biochemistry and mental state, moving away from the fear and self-criticism associated with the pursuit of perfection, and towards assertive calm and authenticity. It is a self-empowerment tool that reaffirms that the body is a lever for the mind, essential for developing a success mindset that resists any attempt to undermine it. The fake it till you make it rule. The concept of fake it till you make it, developed from Amy Cuddy's research. This represents a powerful reinterpretation of a popular cliché. Moving away from the pejorative idea of hypocrisy or deceiving others, this rule is, in fact, a principle of psychological and behavioral transformation deeply rooted in neuroscience and self-perception theory. The core of the rule is not falsehood, but rather the strategic and temporary use of behaviors and postures associated with a desired state, such as confidence and presence, so that, through repetition and self-suggestion, this state becomes internalized and a genuine and lasting characteristic of the individual. The rule is, therefore, an engine for identity change. The detailed history of the concept begins with an understanding of brain plasticity and the feedback loop between action and cognition. For a long time, psychology focused primarily on the premise that behavioral change requires a prior change in thinking. Cuddy's approach reverses this causality. She suggests that by altering the action specifically, through physiology and nonverbal behavior, the individual can, in fact, induce a change in state. Cognitive and emotional. The act of pretending here is not a social lie, but a two-way intervention aimed at changing how the brain itself perceives and functions in stressful situations. The most notable application of this rule is in power poses. By instructing individuals to adopt expansive and open postures, which typically signal power and dominance, even when they feel internally anxious or insecure, the goal is to trigger a conditioning process. The body sends signals to the brain. We are in a high-power position. We are secure. We are ready to act. This message counteracts the internal state of anxiety, which would translate into elevated cortisol and low testosterone. By maintaining the high-power pose for a brief period, the body begins to produce the aforementioned hormonal changes, decreased cortisol and increased testosterone, which, in a virtuous cycle, reinforce the physical and mental sensation of presence and assertiveness. The keyword in the rule is make, become it, the pretending phase, is a transitional stage, a bridge. The individual is not expected to continue simulating confidence indefinitely. What is expected is that, by repeating the behavior associated with confidence, such as maintaining an upright posture, speaking in a firm tone of voice, or maintaining eye contact, the brain begins to create new neural networks and reinterpret reality. The individual builds a collection of experiences in which they behaved confidently, and these experiences serve as evidence for a new internal narrative. The internal dialogue shifts from, I am a fraud, to, I am capable of handling this, and finally, I am confident. The initial pretense transforms into genuine self-confidence, not through a sudden epiphany, but through a gradual and physically anchored learning process. It is vital that the rule not be misinterpreted as promoting a superficial persona. Presence. It is the element of authenticity that differentiates Cuddy's approach from mere empty performance. The person who pretends, in Cuddy's sense, is not trying to be someone else. They are actively seeking the expression of their ideal self, their maximum potential, which is temporarily blocked by anxiety or insecurity. The act of adopting power poses is a form of remove physiological and psychological barriers that prevent the individual's true capabilities and values from fully manifesting. The confidence that emerges is, therefore, a genuine manifestation of the individual's internal resources, which have been unlocked by strategic behavior. The concept of fake it till you make it is particularly powerful in overcoming imposter syndrome. Many high-achieving individuals feel fraudulent, fearing their successes will be discovered as accidents. By adopting this rule, the person with imposter syndrome isn't lying about their qualifications. They are using the action to reversing the limiting belief internally. Confident action generates positive results. Positive results reinforce the new narrative, and the cycle of insecurity is broken. Self-efficacy is built from small victories and consistent actions that prove to the individual, on a visceral level, that he or she is, in fact, capable and deserving of their success. Implementing this rule requires consistency and patience, as neuroplasticity is a process that takes time. Pretending should be seen as small behavioral experiments, hypothesis tests about one's own identity and capabilities. Each time an individual chooses a powerful posture instead of shrinking, or a firm tone of voice instead of murmuring, they are actively rewriting the code of their self-image. The repetition of these small actions leads to the consolidation of a new behavioral pattern, which eventually translates into a new identity. The unwavering mindset emerges when presence, which was initially induced, becomes the individual's default response to stress and challenge, no longer requiring the conscious effort of pretending. The rule evolves from a tactic to a total transformation, where the individual becomes the confidence they sought to simulate. Body language shaping the mind. Research on body language. Shaping the mind forms the theoretical and empirical foundation of much of Amy Cuddy's philosophy on presence and a success mindset. This topic delves into the science of embodied cognition. Embodied cognition, or embodied cognition (ARS), argues that the relationship between mental state and physical expression is a two-way street, and that the body holds an underestimated power to influence and, in fact, reshape the brain and internal psychological experience. The history of this idea departs from the traditional view that sees the body merely as a passive receptacle of emotions and thoughts, elevating it to an active and intervening role in modulating our identity and behavior. Historically, the dominant paradigm in psychology posits that emotions and mental states, such as confidence, fear, or joy, originate in the brain and are subsequently expressed through the body. The brain sends a stress signal, and the body reacts by shrinking. The brain feels joy, and the body smiles and expands. Research on body language shaping the mind, however, introduces a powerful and crucial element of feedback. It demonstrates that the conscious and intentional adoption of certain postures and physical expressions can trigger or intensify corresponding emotional and cognitive states. This is an immediately accessible tool for self-empowerment, as body posture can be altered more quickly and easily than deeply ingrained thoughts and beliefs. The mechanism by which body language shapes the mind is multifaceted, involving neuroscience, endocrinology, and social psychology. At the endocrinological level, the body uses posture to communicate with the autonomic nervous system. Expansive, open, and space-occupying postures, high-power poses, are ethologically associated with dominance, security, and a lack of threat. When the body assumes this position, it signals to the brain that the environment is safe and that the individual is in a position of control. This signaling leads to the modulation of crucial hormones. The decrease in the production of cortisol hormone, the primary hormone of the stress and threat response, is a direct result of this safety signaling. In parallel, an increase in levels of hormones is observed. Testosterone, the hormone associated with assertiveness, risk-taking, and tolerance for ambiguity. This change in the internal biochemical cocktail is not an illusion. It is a measurable physiological alteration that predisposes the individual to think and behave in a more confident, calm, and proactive manner. At a psychological and cognitive level, posture affects self-perception. The brain is constantly trying to make sense of the sensory information it receives from the body, proprioception. When the body is in a hunched, or closed posture, the brain interprets this as a sign of vulnerability, low energy, and submission, reinforcing feelings of insecurity and anxiety. Conversely, When an individual adopts a posture of high power, this somatic information reinforces the belief in one's own effectiveness and capability. Behavior precedes and informs attitude. The mind internalizes the status that the body is actively communicating. This is the core of the rule: fake it till you make it. The act of act powerfully allows the individual feel powerful, and this feeling solidifies into a new belief about oneself. The relevance of body language. Shaping the mind for an unwavering mindset is profound. In moments of high pressure, such as a negotiation, an interview, or a public speech, individuals naturally tend to slouch, cross their arms, or close their bodies, reflexes of anxiety and the need for self-protection. If this body language is allowed, it amplifies and validates the state of internal stress, creating a vicious cycle of anxiety and poor performance. The intervention of power poses breaks this cycle. By deliberately expanding the body and taking up space, the individual exercises a form of internal control about his own chemistry and psychology, regardless of external circumstances. He is using the body as a lever to regulate his emotions and to access a state of presence and mental clarity that would otherwise be suppressed by anxiety. The beauty of this mechanism lies in its simplicity and universality. It doesn't require years of therapy or the acquisition of complex new cognitive skills. It only requires 2 minutes of conscious physical intervention. By doing so, the individual is arming themselves against the paralysis of fear and perfectionism, not by denying their insecurities, but by altering their physiological basis. The mindset that emerges is unshakable because it is not dependent on external approval or immediate success, but rather on the individual's ability to anchor themselves in an internal state of calm and power, using their own body as the engine of this transformation. Body language, therefore, is not just about how others see us. It is fundamentally about how the body teaches us to see and feel ourselves, serving as a powerful tool for self-regulation and building genuine confidence. Resilience and alignment. The interconnection between resilience and attunement, from Amy Cuddy's perspective, refers to an individual's ability to maintain their integrity and effectiveness in the face of adversity. Resilience, anchored in a profound state of inner alignment and authenticity. Attunement or presence. This topic explores how attunement, the coherence between thoughts, feelings, and actions, is the fundamental engine that generates the inner strength necessary for a success mindset to become unshakable in the face of criticism, failures, or social and professional setbacks. The conceptual history of this link begins with the premise that the vulnerability to be overcome, whether by a derogatory comment or an unexpected failure, lies not so much in the external event, but in the internal fragmentation of the individual. When a person is out of sync, that is, when they are trying to perform a role, hide insecurity, or conform to external expectations, the pursuit of perfection, they create a discrepancy between their inner self and their external presentation. This discrepancy drains cognitive and emotional energy and, crucially, leaves the individual exposed. It's like wearing a mask that, when broken by pressure, reveals a fragile foundation. Resilience, in this context, is the ability to remain whole under pressure. In this sense, tuning in is synonymous with presence, the state in which the individual is fully engaged and aligned. When an individual is tuned in, they are not wasting mental resources monitoring their performance, filtering their words for fear of judgment, or desperately trying to control others' perceptions. Instead, energy is channeled into the task at hand, into communicating their truth, and into the authentic expression of their values and skills. This state of alignment generates a psychophysiological coherence, which acts as a force field against external chaos. If the mind, body, and values are in harmony, what is said or done externally is a faithful reflection of what is happening internally. Resilience emerges from this attunement because the individual begins to have internal locus of evaluation. Success or failure is not primarily defined by the approval of others or by immediate results. Instead, the metric of success is faithfulness to one's own presence and the fullness with which one has expressed oneself or acted. If a attuned individual speaks clearly about their convictions and is still rejected or criticized, the emotional blow is mitigated. They can say to themselves, "I was authentic, I gave my best, I represented my values." Criticism, then, is seen as feedback on the message or context, and not as a condemnation of their intrinsic personal worth. Owner self-aware, in tune with oneself, and does not allow the opinions of others to define one's reality. Research on how body language shapes the mind fits perfectly here. Power poses are a tuning technique. By adopting a high-power pose, the individual is not only altering their hormones, lowering stress cortisol, they are aligning your physiological state with the intention of being assertive and present. This physical alignment contributes to internal coherence. Reducing cortisol frees the mind from the paralysis of fear, allowing for clearer thinking and a more thoughtful response to adversity. Resilience is not just enduring the blows, but the ability to respond effectively and consistently with one's own values, even under pressure. Tuning in ensures this consistency. A fundamental aspect of attunement is knowledge of and anchoring in one's own values. When an individual is under stress, their belief and value system, the core self, should be a firm point of reference. Attunement is the practice of to live these values currently. If a core value is honesty, for example, the attuned individual will not succumb to the temptation to exaggerate or lie to achieve temporary success, as this would create an internal dissonance that would undermine their presence and, consequently, their resilience. Inner strength is built on the certainty that, regardless of the external outcome, the integrity of the action was maintained. It is this unbreakable integrity that prevents the person from being brought down. Alignment and resilience create a psychological armor, that which is invisible yet impenetrable. It doesn't protect the individual from falling, but ensures that, upon falling, they have the center of gravity and flexibility necessary to get up immediately without losing their sense of who they are and where they are going. An unwavering mindset is not one that avoids adversity, but one that absorbs and processes it without suffering structural damage to its identity or self-esteem. This capacity for absorption and return to its original form is the very definition of resilience, and it is activated and sustained by a continuous state of internal attunement. By focusing on presence and authenticity, the individual becomes a coherent and robust system, much more resistant to the disintegrating forces of external judgment and failure. Attunement, therefore, is the engineering of resilience. Overcoming imposter syndrome. Overcoming imposter syndrome, from the perspective of Amy Cuddy's philosophy, is not simply a matter of cognitive correction or a list of positive affirmations, but rather a deep re-engineering of self-perception, which utilizes the strength of the body and presence to dismantle the fear of exposure and falsehood. Imposter syndrome is a psychological phenomenon in which highly competent and successful individuals are unable to internalize their achievements, living in constant fear of being unmasked as frauds or imposters, despite clear external evidence of their competence. Cuddy's approach offers a practical and physiological antidote to this debilitating condition, focusing on congruence and authenticity rather than striving for perfection. The detailed history of the concept begins with the identification of the vicious cycle of imposter syndrome. The individual, driven by the anxiety of being discovered, expends an enormous amount of mental and emotional energy on performance monitoring and self-concealment. The energy that should be dedicated to the task or to expressing one's competence is diverted to creating and maintaining an unattainable facade of perfection. This attempt to be perfect is, paradoxically, what sustains the feeling of being an imposter, because the person feels they are performing a role and not being their true ability. With each success, instead of feeling validated, the fear intensifies. I raised expectations, and now the fall will be greater. Success is attributed to luck, excessive effort, and not competence, or the successful manipulation of others, perception. Cuddy's essential contribution is breaking this cycle through the concept of presence as authenticity. The key is not to prove to others that you are competent, which is the imposter's goal, but to allow the true me and true skills. These feelings manifest without the interference of anxiety and fear of judgment. Body language techniques, such as power pose, act as a foundational intervention. By adopting an expansive and powerful posture for 2 minutes, the individual is actively reducing their cortisol levels, the stress and fear hormone, and increasing testosterone, the assertiveness hormone. This biochemical shift is fundamental because it removes the mind from its usual mode of control, fight or flight, the state in which imposter syndrome flourishes, and puts it in a state of calm and readiness. Anxiety is the imposter's fuel. By reducing anxiety physiologically, the basis of the syndrome is weakened. The act of fake it till you make it is crucial in this context. A person suffering from imposter syndrome constantly feels like a fraud. The rule, as applied here, instructs the individual to act as if was deserving and trustworthy, not to deceive, but to program your own brain by behaving in a way that consistently exudes confidence through firm posture, sustained eye contact, and a modulated voice. the brain receives a new set of behavioral evidence. With repetition, the individual accumulates experiences in which they behaved competently and presently. These new experiences compete with and eventually replace the limiting internal narrative of "I am a fraud." The initial pretense transforms into internalized self-efficacy, a confidence that does not depend on external validation, but on the record of successful actions. Overcoming imposter syndrome is, to a large extent, a renegotiation with vulnerability. The imposter tries to be perfect to avoid being caught. Presence, Cuddy's antidote, requires the individual to accept their imperfection and present themselves in a way that authentic in any case. When vulnerability is accepted and the individual allows themselves to express their values and competence, even with hesitations or minor flaws, the fear of being exposed diminishes. Why? Because there is no longer a fraud to be discovered. What is being presented is the real self, with its strengths and weaknesses. The rejection of an authentic person is less destructive to the psyche than the unmasking of a facade that cost enormous effort to maintain. Unwavering strength comes from the certainty that what is at stake is the self, not an unsustainable performance. The alignment of values, it's the finishing touch. Imposter syndrome is often fueled by an excessive focus on external metrics of success: money, titles, social approval. By aligning with core values, integrity, contribution, passion, for example, the individual shifts their locus of control and evaluation. Success is redefined as the loyalty to these values. If an individual is acting in alignment with their values, they are being who they truly are, and the feeling of being an imposter has no basis. The mindset becomes unshakable because external criticism or momentary failure cannot undermine the integrity of the internal action and the validity of the person acting. Complete overcoming occurs when the individual understands that they already are, fundamentally, enough, and that presence is the manifestation of this innate sufficiency. Rewriting the internal narrative. Re-evaluating the internal narrative is an essential and profoundly transformative component of Amy Cuddy's approach to developing an unwavering success mindset. The concept is based on the premise that the inner voice, the continuous dialogue we have with ourselves about our abilities, our worth, and our deservingness, is the true architect of our psychological reality, and, consequently, of our performance and resilience. The internal narrative is not merely a passive flow of thoughts, it is an active structure, an interpretive filter that determines how we perceive success, failure, and the opinions of others. Shifting the mindset from a vulnerable state to an unwavering one therefore requires conscious and strategic intervention to rewrite this central story. The detailed history of the concept begins with cognitive psychology, which demonstrates that human beings do not react directly to events, but rather to their interpretation. These events can be interpreted in various ways. If an individual fails at an important presentation, the negative internal narrative might be, "I am incompetent and I was exposed as a fraud." This narrative generates shame, paralysis, and reinforces imposter syndrome. In contrast, a rewritten narrative could be, "I didn't do well in this presentation, but this is feedback. My core competence remains, and I am capable of learning and doing better next time." The change lies in attributing the cause and projecting the future, shifting from a fixed and destructive characteristic, "I am incompetent," to a temporary and malleable state, "My performance was insufficient and I can improve it." Unwavering, it does not reside in the absence of flaws, but in the inability of flaws to dismantle one's sense of self-worth. Cuddy's contribution to this idea is to link the internal narrative directly to the physiology of presence. A toxic and self-critical internal narrative is what fuels a state of low power, increasing cortisol and inducing shrinking postures. When the mind is panicked and the narrative is destructive, the body reacts defensively, and vice versa. Rewriting the narrative works in conjunction with power postures, the fake it till you make it. The act of adopting an expansive, high-power posture, even for just 2 minutes, not only alters stress hormones but also offers a brief window of mental clarity, a space where the internal narrative can be actively challenged and rewritten. By signaling power and security to the brain, the body weakens the credibility of the inner voice that insists on weakness and fear. The technique of rewriting the narrative is, essentially, the replacement of the story with insecurity and inadequacy through the history of capacity and sufficiency. Many negative internal narratives are based on social comparison and in the relentless pursuit of perfection. The individual says to themselves, "I am worse than everyone else," or "I will only be worthy when I am flawless." The new narrative must be based on authenticity. It is presence. The person remembers, I am enough. I bring my authentic self to the table. My value is not in approval, but in my integrity and my ability to contribute. This narrative shifts the locus of control from external to internal, disarming the power that the judgment of others and less than ideal outcomes have over well-being and motivation. A key aspect of rewriting is the practice of self-affirmation centered on values. Effective self-affirmation, according to research, is not about blindly praising oneself, but about reaffirming the values most important to the individual, such as honesty, kindness, creativity. In moments of pressure, when a negative internal narrative begins to emerge, the individual intentionally brings to mind a core value and remembers how that value guides their actions. For example, if the value is integrity, the narrative is rewritten from, I will fail and I will look stupid, to, my integrity is unwavering, and that is what I am expressing. The outcome of the presentation does not define who I am. This anchors identity in something immutable and profound, rather than in superficial performance. Resilience, which is the ultimate goal of an unwavering mindset, is directly proportional to the quality of the internal narrative. Resilience is not just the ability to recover from a setback, but the ability to interpret. The setback is presented in a way that promotes growth, rather than surrender. The rewritten internal narrative transforms failure from a test of incompetence into a learning opportunity and a necessary step on the path. The individual learns to separate the event, the event was a mistake, but the self is still valuable and capable. The work of rewriting the internal narrative is an ongoing exercise of self-kindness and self-awareness. This requires acknowledging inner critical voices and deliberately choosing to replace them with a supportive and accepting narrative. The mindset becomes unshakable because the foundation upon which it rests is one's own intrinsic worth and acceptance of imperfection. There is no longer a need to maintain a fragile facade of perfection. Success and presence are built upon the truth that I am enough, exactly as I am now, and I am ready to act. This is the narrative of a success that no one can tear down, for its source lies in unconditional inner approval. Perfect. Based on Amy Cuddy's Unwavering Success Mindset theme, here's a final call to action focused on motivating registration and commenting. If you've made it this far, it's because you're ready for stop pretending to be confident and finally become the present and powerful person you already are. Knowledge is the first step, but action is what creates an unwavering mindset. Don't let this change stop here. To ensure you continue to receive more science-based strategies for mastering your body, mind, and presence, subscribe to the channel now and tap the bell. Your transformation begins with one click. What is your stance? We want to know. Which of Amy Cuddy's topics resonated with you the most? Was it the power of presence, power postures, or the idea of rewriting the internal narrative? Leave your comment below and share which technique you will apply today, in the next 2 minutes, to change your brain chemistry. Be present, be authentic, and let's build this unbreakable community together.